who saw a weakness in the laws which could be attacked through the courts.
Charles Hamilton Houston was a brilliant student, matriculating at Amherst. He was commissioned in the United States Army, going through Fort Des Moines, in essence, after a tour in Europe, where he was subjected to much racial discrimination, because in the United States military he returned and entered law school at Harvard University. He became one of the charter members of Alpha Eta chapter, which was the chapter at Harvard University of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. He later came back to Washington, D.C., and was a charter member of Mu Lambda chapter. And during that time, taught at Howard University, became dean of the Howard University Law School, and became a mentor to many of the law students who later led the fight to dismantle the racial barriers in the United States, among them Thurgood Marshall.
So I remember this as a student at Fisk and as the president of Alphas at Fisk in 1934, when Charles Hamilton Houston came to Fisk University. I had the enviable pleasure of introducing him. I shall never forget his speech. That the passion, the commitment that he communicated to everyone who heard him. I think when Charles Houston got through, we were ready to roll up our sleeves and go out in the community and organize people, to have them to vote, to have them to participate in the drive for equality just immediately. That was our passion as a result of his being there and talking to us. And it lighted a fire in us that I think could not be extinguished in our lifetime.
Two of Charles Hamilton Houston's protégés at Howard, Alpha brothers Thurgood Marshall and Belford V. Lawson, Jr., joined Houston and other Alpha trial lawyers in arguing many of the country's major court cases affecting civil rights and civil liberties. Unavailable to address the fraternity's 1936 General Convention, Houston wrote Alpha President Charles H. Wesley to recommend Thurgood Marshall as a capable alternative. Wesley accepted this substitution, encouraging the up-and-coming young lawyer who did not disappoint. He called on Alpha brothers to support the legal battles against segregation, in which further advances were soon achieved. When Donald Murray of Baltimore was denied admission to the University of Maryland Law School on account of his race in 1935, Houston, Marshall, and Lawson filed suit to challenge his exclusion. With the support of NAACP lawyers, they argued the case successfully before the Maryland Court of Appeals, and the school was required to admit Murray. However, Murray was unable to afford books and tuition, so Alpha then stepped up to pay his costs until he graduated. The success of this case demonstrated the great potential of fighting discrimination in the courts. Continuing the momentum, Houston and Alpha brother Sidney R. Redmond sued the University of Missouri for denying fellow Alpha man Lloyd L. Gaines admission to the university's law school. The case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and in 1938 was decided in Gaines' favor. All Alpha men shared a great sense of pride when brother Jesse Owens rocked the world with his record-breaking gold medal performances at the 1936 Olympics. Setting the world's record and winning 4 gold medals made Owens a national hero. 2 other Alpha brothers, Ralph Metcalf and Dave Albritton, joined Owens in winning Olympic medals for the entire world to see, including Germany's new leader, Adolf Hitler, who was heard to say, "We will next time forbid any participation of anything African."
Here you have Jesse Owens winning 4 gold medals at the 1936 Olympics and just shattering this myth of Aryan supremacy and demonstrating the ability of African Americans to compete at the highest level.
I think that we saw the demonstration of a kind of superb performance that could justify the advocacy of equality. For here was a superior type of activity on the part of an African American that proved not merely to white America, but to the world what an African American could do.
At home, Alpha Phi Alpha soon took a new focus of black electoral participation. In 1937, the fraternity launched a campaign with the motto, "A voteless people is a hopeless people," endeavoring to gain political empowerment for African Americans through voter education. The Brothers of Alpha mounted a massive campaign. This program continues today as Alpha encourages African Americans to make their voices heard via the ballot box.
I think the program is a little bit more elevated now, a little bit more organized, but at the grassroots level, that is essentially what it is. It is going to shopping centers, it's going to populated areas, to fairs, to amusement parks, any place there's a conglomerate of individuals, and ensuring that everyone understands the responsibility of being good citizens. And you cannot be a good citizen if you are not a voting citizen.
At the outset of World War II, Alpha men embraced the opportunity to serve their country. Many African Americans served in the Second World War, but Alpha men found the segregated structure of the military frustrating and oppressive. Fascism was not the only adversary they faced.
During World War II, there was a slogan amongst African Americans that we were fighting a double V campaign for victory abroad as well as victory at home. And there was a determination that after World War II, things were going to be different, that this country could never be the same as it was before World War II. And Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity was poised to make sure that this change occurred, that this change began to take place.
When they returned from the war, African Americans found little change regarding civil rights in America. Even as they disembarked from troop ships, signs separated them from the white soldiers.
Black men who participated in World War II had their horizons expanded. They saw the world. They saw that racial segregation and discrimination was not natural, that in other countries, in France, in England, in Italy, that they were treated as equals. And they said, if this could exist amongst white people abroad, why can't this exist among white people in the United States?
Addressing this problem, Belford Lawson, elected general president of the fraternity in 1946, challenged his brothers to an even more active role in the fight for equality in America. The great decision of this generation of alpha men is whether we shall, with every ounce of energy, with every dollar in our treasury, with every fiber of our mind and soul, deny the gigantic conspiracy to preserve our status quo and destroy the mighty, monstrous mockery of human decency and dignity.
He was one of the most eloquent and passionate advocates of the program of seeking equality of opportunity and seeking the complete enfranchisement of African Americans throughout the country. And I think that it was his passion that renewed the efforts on the part of the fraternity to achieve equality. And Lawson was, of course, he was one of the greatest orators I've ever heard, and one of the greatest advocates of social betterment that I have ever heard.
On May 17, 1942, en route from Washington, D.C. to Birmingham on the Southern Railroad, Elmer Henderson was denied dining car service and subsequently retained the services of Belford v. Lawson to challenge the railroad's segregation practices. With the financial backing of Alpha Phi Alpha and later the NAACP, the case went to the Supreme Court with Belford v. Lawson and Alpha Associate General Counsel John A. Sandifer arguing on Mr. Henderson's behalf. In 1950, the court ruled in Mr. Henderson's favor, putting an end to discrimination on America's railroads. When Alpha brother Herman Marion Swett sought admission to the University of Texas Law School in 1946, the state of Texas set up a separate school for Swett in a basement. In another suit, supported by Alpha Phi Alpha, the Supreme Court ruled in 1950 that African Americans could not receive an equal education in hastily assembled separate facilities, foreshadowing the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision, declaring that separate was inherently unequal. Simultaneously, other Alpha brothers such as Arthur D. Shores of Birmingham, Alabama, fought diligently on the very front lines of the civil rights struggle, challenging local statutes maintaining segregation.
We called him in Alabama the Dean of Black Lawyers because at one time only he and one other lawyer were licensed to practice in the state of Alabama. He crisscrossed the state, taking cases, being a legal advocate for the black citizens of the state of Alabama in the Birmingham area and all over the state of Alabama.
Brother Frederick Douglass Patterson, president of Tuskegee Institute, spearheaded a major effort for African American higher education in 1944, pushing for the foundation of the United Negro College Fund. Of the schools originally participating in the United Negro College Fund scholarship program, the majority had presidents who were Alpha brothers. In appreciation of such tireless efforts on behalf of African Americans, the fraternity created the Alpha Award of Honor and the Alpha Award of Merit. Upon accepting the first Alpha Award of Honor, Thurgood Marshall cautioned the brothers that further struggle for freedom and equality still lay ahead. Marshall soon began work on the landmark court case Brown versus the Topeka Board of Education and enlisted fellow Alpha men for assistance.
I was teaching at Cornell, by the way, in the summer of 1953 when I got a call from, would you believe it, Thurgood Marshall. And he said, "John Hope, what are you doing this fall?" I said, "I'm going back to Howard University where I'm teaching." He said, "You know what else you'll be doing?" I said, "No." He said, "You'll be working for me." I said, "What will I be doing?" He said, "Well, you're going to be working for on the second brief in Brown against the Board of Education." I saw then what I could see at no other place, in no other point, the deep, deep commitment of Thurgood Marshall to the whole program and to finding an answer to these questions and to persuading the Supreme Court that the Constitution, that the 14th Amendment was on our side, so to speak. I've never seen a man work so hard. I've never. My father was a lawyer, and I've seen him work. And I've seen people work in other areas, but I've never seen anyone work as hard as Thurgood Marshall did in the summer and fall of 1953. And I did not know until later that his wife was dying at that time. And he sat there working day and night. I remember one night at midnight, he said, well, we'll take a 15-minute break. That was the most inspiring performance of duty that I've ever seen in my life by anyone. And I shall always remember that, and I shall always be humbled by it. For I then learned what real sacrifice, what real devotion, what real commitment, what real passion can be and can bring about.
These tireless efforts in the courts led to continuing progress that forever altered American life.
Dramatic news as the United States Supreme Court rules in the school segregation case of Brown versus the Topeka Board of Education.
On May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Brown, and African Americans across the country rejoiced. While the Brown decision was a victory against segregation, the implementation and enforcement of the ruling was a different story.
Education facilities are inherently unequal.
I remember so well on May the 17th, 1954, my wife, who was the librarian at Spingarn High School here in Washington, and I was at Howard University, my wife called me on the afternoon of the 17th of May, and she said, have you heard the news? I said, what news? She said, the Supreme Court decision. I said, no. She said, we won. And, of course, I was immensely pleased, delighted. And then I learned that the entire country was reacting. Those people who were promoting desegregation were happy about it and elated. But I also realized, even on that afternoon, and particularly that night and the next day, that while some people celebrated the 14th Amendment, there were others who were decrying the decision, expressing disappointment, and expressing determination to nullify that opinion, regardless of what it took.
The Southern reaction was often ugly, sometimes violent. Students, parents, and elected officials refused to abide by the Brown ruling, forcing federal intervention. But the push forward continued and increased momentum in coming years.
Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, of course, is involved in